everybody, welcome to Book Talk. No, I am not your regular host, the lovely Cara Putnam, but I am your host for today because our guest is the host, Cara Putnam.
Hello.
And we are going to be talking about her book that comes out in May, The Targeted. I want you guys to know it is up for pre-order. So get out there, pre-order that book, get her some sales because she's a fabulous writer. And, we don't have many people writing legal thrillers in our Christian space. And so we really, really want to get our hands on this book. I actually adore reading on vacation, and this book comes out in May, which means that you can have the book for your vacation read as well. I gobble up as many books as I possibly can because I'm not writing on vacation, so I don't get distracted. But I love reading on vacation. So grab The Targeted so you can be scared at night. Is this a scary book? I don't think this is a scary book.
No, not too much, hopefully.
Anyway,
Thanks, Rachel.
Cara, how does it feel to be in that chair?
It's a little different being on this side, but I really appreciate you coming on to do this because it's not easy to interview yourself about a book that's coming out. So thank you, Rachel.
How's your book? Well, I think it's really great.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't quite figure out how to do that without it being really, really weird.
So you guys, another little plug here. She mentioned on the Christian Fiction Reading Challenge Zoom, that's the last Tuesday of every month, that she didn't have anybody to interview her. So I stuck my little paw in the air and go, I'll do it. So here we are. By the way, I'm Rachel Hauck, in case you don't know. Anyway, so let's talk about The Targeted, which is book 3 in the Secrets to Keep series. So let's read the back cover blurb before we get started. Can she protect her gym students before her past catches up? When Chloe Ainsworth, older sister, reappears after 14 years, she brings with her the news that Chloe's abuser is back in town. Chloe is a coach at her girlhood gym and is fiercely protective of her young gymnast. She won't allow them to suffer the way she did, but she is desperate for an ally who can help her make her case. Along comes Dak Shepard, a law student who works at the legal clinic, where he meets her and hears out her story. He believes her case, but can't quite get the clinic director on board. Makes me suspicious. As he learns more about her story, he finds himself bound by a deepening personal care for Chloe. They band together in search of answers, and suddenly the stakes skyrocket. It's clear they're onto something, but will they be able to find the answers before it's too late? Wow, that's what I said when I read that, and I've read it several times. That sounds super exciting. And if it's very real life, if you follow the news, right?
Yeah.
Also, I do have to ask this question before we get going. Dare's deepening care for Chloe, is this just a legal thriller or is this a romantic thriller? I have to know right off the bat.
Yeah. Now, there's definitely romance in it. And it's one of those, my books kind of depend on the book as to how much romance is in it, because part of it depends on kind of the timeline. How tight is the timeline? Because I'm not one of those who's going to be like, they meet, they fall in love, and then they get engaged or whatever, like in a week, because I'm like, it has to still be realistic. But yeah, there's definitely that attraction. And so there's romance for those who like romance, but it's also got this ticking time bomb feel. And in some ways, it's a little stronger than in some of my other books because you've got this sense of there's this collision between her past and her present. And because it also involves what's happening with students in gym and all of that, which does have that rip from the headlines kind of feel to it.
Definitely.
That there's this element of, okay, is she going to be able to protect her current students from the shadows of what's happened in her past? So it's got this, I think, fun dynamic while also honoring the experience of those who have lived it.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's really something we try to do in fiction. I did that with one of my stories. I wanted to honor an element of it so that we can remember,
Yeah.
And that's part of the beauty of what we get to do. So let's dive into The Targeted, though. This novel tackles targeting, which is a little bit different than what we try to do with our Facebook ads. It's very personal, it's painful, and especially in a system that fails people they were trying to protect. So as you were putting the story together, what questions were you wrestling with that became the heart of the story?
So it's one of those that in some ways was intensely personal without having actually lived the story.
Ooh,
My daughters both did gymnastics, and one of
yep,
them
yep.
did gymnastics all the way through high school. My kids have also done youth sports in soccer and swimming. So two of them are in high school and are still doing swimming right now. And then I'm a USA swim official. So
Ooh,
I've done it from the officiating side. I haven't been a coach, but I've been like deeply embedded in youth sports from making sure that the
yeah,
meets happen and things like that. So I've been the parent on the sidelines. I've had my kids be embedded in sports because my husband and I think it's really important. And then I also was a competitor as a kid. So I've seen all the different
oh, wait,
sides.
hold on. As a kid?
Yeah,
No, and you're a competitor now. She's a great
well, that's true.
competitor. I just got to insert that. We love Cara, but the girl goes for stuff, and man, you're inspiring. So go on. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
well, that's true. I mean, I am kind of a competitive person, like through and through. But
In all the
so
right ways.
yeah, and so like if you know anything about gymnastics and USA gymnastics, you know that there have been scandals, but it's not just
Mhm.
in gymnastics. I just chose that because it's a sport I know and love.
Yeah.
I still remember Mary Lou Retton getting her perfect 10 at the Olympics. I did a tiny bit of gymnastics because where I grew up, there just weren't a lot of opportunities. So when my kids decided they wanted to do gymnastics, I was like, yes, let's do it.
Yeah.
And I became a swim official because I had taught swimming and had been a swimmer, and I knew I couldn't, it would take a lot to become a gymnastics official and judge. And so it was like one of those, but like my oldest was at a University of Michigan gymnastics camp. So when everything broke about the other school in Michigan and everything that had happened, I had that momentary, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
what was she at that one or the other one? And
Yeah.
so and then there was a lot that happened in Indiana where I'm from that I mean there were some moments where you're like, did I do a good job protecting my child? And then as
Right.
you read the memoirs and things like that and you see that some of what was happening, the parents were in the room with the doctor and things like that. And we are grateful. I mean, the coaches my kids have had have helped mold my young adults into the amazing people that they are, but not everybody's experience is that. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to be really aware of the positions of authority that these people have on very vulnerable children. And
Yeah.
so just being aware and like the training I've had to have as a swim official, I thought it when they're talking about swimmer safety, it was going to be about concussions and injuries, and that's not it at all. The
Mm-mm.
first time I had to hit mute really fast because my kids were in the room, and I'm like, oh, it's just going to be like, physical injuries, not at all. And so I think it's important to like be aware and at the same time, like really honor these stories because often they're not public. Like what happened
Yeah.
in gymnastics became very public because there were women who were willing to be very brave and open about their experiences. But there are a
Mhm.
lot of people who don't feel like they can do that. And so we
Mhm.
have to shine a light on what often happens in darkness so that we can stop it from happening in the future.
Yeah, that's so true. And even if there's people who don't want to speak up, it makes authorities aware in the schools, in the programs, that they're watching out for who they're letting be close to the kids.
Yeah.
So, so that's really good. So in this story, though, Chloe and her sister are kind of at the core of the book. We know the sister comes back and
Mhm.
tells her your abuser's back in town, which would not give me warm fuzzies.
Yeah.
But their sisterhood carries both strength and, but yet it's fractured by
Mhm.
all of this stuff. So, how did you approach their relationship? And given the light of what we just talked about, how was it shaped by their shared trauma and the silence and the misunderstanding that surrounds this whole issue?
Yeah, I mean, it was fractured in large part because of how they were both trying to protect the other. And I
Right.
think that
Yeah.
happens so often,
Yeah.
where, especially when you're younger and vulnerable, you can, again, that's part of the pressure that gets applied by people who are in power and authority, is they tell these stories that children, young adults don't have the perspective and the position, the history to be able to go, that's a lie, that's not how it's going to play out. And so that's part of what is fractured their relationship. And then that distance and space just continues to grow, so that by the time the sister comes back, there's so much distance. There's been so much time that has passed that it's hard for them to find each other again. And so that dynamic is real. And I think many of us can relate to that in different ways. In different relationships that we've had. And so I don't think it's a far stretch for us to go, oh yeah, I can see that happening. I can see that playing out. And then how do we find each other? How do we get through the lies, the distance, to find the truth and to come back to each other?
Yeah, that's really interesting because you have something to talk about, but it's painful. So how do we
Yes.
talk about it?
Yeah.
And we, they probably have been estranged for 14 years. So really
Yeah.
what I am hearing is this is a love story between sisters as well. And
It
then
is.
coming back to each other, which is really important.
And that restoration of
Yeah.
the brokenness, in some ways it's almost that, the Bible talks about what the locusts have destroyed, God restores,
Yeah.
and almost that Job type of story
Mhm.
where, there's this peace. And part of what Chloe has to deal with and wrestle with is this idea of, does she have to confront the past to be able to move forward, or has she been frozen because she hasn't been able to deal with the past? And I think, again, many of us can relate to that kind of situation where maybe there's this piece of our past that is so painful, we don't know how to deal with it. And then we reach a point where we're like, I may not be able to move into whatever the future holds for me until I deal with this moment, this situation, this experience. And so there's that is kind of what propels her. And then when the coach comes back, she's like, okay, I have to. So there's kind of this confluence of lots of different things coming together to kind of explode her into, I can't just not deal with this.
Yeah. I'm sure you created a villain that's charming. Like he's gonna charm his way. I can already see it. He's gonna charm his way back in, like, oh, I'm the coach. You know me. Oh my goodness. You guys, we have to read this book. All
Yeah,
right.
well, and that's what happened with the real people, is
Mhm.
often they are
Yeah.
so charming and narcissistic, and they've got all these characters, and they're not all narcissists, but they are able to, like when you look at the doctor with USA Gymnastics, he was the good guy. You've got these coaches who are like all Eastern European and harsh and da, 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 and
Yeah.
he was the fun one. And he was the one who seemed to be like warm and approachable and joked around. And so, and then you add the authority to it, and you've got these young girls, and they don't know, and they're isolated. And it was like this perfect storm. It was hard reading those memoirs and watching the documentaries and like having to put myself into their shoes, but you could so see
Yeah.
how it happened. It was a
Yeah.
perfect storm.
It is. And there's the other side of that is they work so hard to get where they
Mhm.
are and they know the sacrifice that their parents have made.
Yeah.
And so I don't like what's happening and their maturity level, you just don't know if you tell, it'll ruin it for everybody. That kind of
Yeah.
mentality, and they're probably told that as well. So, wow. Um,
Yeah.
but the targeted brings us some justice. Hallelujah.
Yes.
So you balance legal tension with these deep emotional stakes. So as you're a writer and you're a lawyer, how did you balance that? You didn't turn into lawyer Cara as you were being writer Cara, as you work through their characters and these deep internal issues, because ultimately in every story, the character has to come to their own reckoning. So
Yeah.
you couldn't just boom, have Dare take the legal case, charge in there, save the day like we would see on TV, whatever law show
Yeah.
you like, the Lincoln Lawyer. But they have to come in, the characters have to wrestle with it. So how did you approach that, and how did you balance that, your writer and your legal mind here?
Yeah, and so part of what I did is I made Dare, he's actually a law student. So he's in this
That's
interesting
good.
position where he's under the authority of a law professor. And I'm not going to give the twist away as to why the law professor is a little reluctant. But so he's hearing the story and he's wanting to take the case, but he can't just do it on his own. Whereas if he was a full lawyer, he could just be like, yeah, I'm taking the case. And so he's like doing the work, because that's what happens with law clinics. Law schools, I have these law clinics, and it's a way for law students to get experience, but they have to do it under a fully licensed attorney who's a professor. And it's a way that they get into court and they get some experience before they graduate, but they're not licensed yet. So they can't just run and do whatever they want to.
Double-edged sword, yeah.
And so it's a very realistic situation, but it puts some brakes on him being able just to run forward and do whatever he wants to. But he also is not a traditional law student. So that gives him the ability to be a little older, to have a little more experience. It's kind of what I did when I went to law school. So I'm pulling on that. Not everybody goes straight from undergrad to law school. And so I'm giving him a little more, I guess, street cred to be able to be like, hey, this feels like there's something there, and
Right.
wanting to go into it more than maybe if he had just come straight from undergrad. So there's some interesting tension there for him.
There you go. That is a class on great character development. I think that really does help because he's not green. He's been out there. He's seen some things. I love that aspect. All right, several characters are haunted by what happened and what didn't happen. So they didn't
Yep.
get their justice. Nobody heard their story. So how did you explore that aspect of the story and the really the books society for their more responsibility without lapsing into agenda fiction or
Yeah.
giving us a courtroom brief? These are the evidence of the case. Like how did you approach that? And I know you're good with characters, so I bet it's going to have to do with that. But and because we talk a lot, especially in our world, because we write with faith based, and we have some reflection of faith, which we'll talk about in a minute. We don't want agenda fiction. Nobody wants
Yep.
whatever you are. I see this in a lot of books. They bring whatever their story is to the story. It doesn't always read true, but we want this to read true. So how did you approach that?
Yeah. So this one, normally in a series that I write, it's like completely standalone. Each book, you just see
Yeah.
carryover characters. In this one, like every once in a while I'd see in reviews, people were like, it feels like there's something that's kind of didn't get fully wrapped up. Well, this is what didn't get fully wrapped up. So if you were
Mm,
picking up on that, this was the thread that didn't get fully wrapped up in The Vanished and The Accused, because those heroines had also been part of the gym. And so if you were like, it feels like there's something that's just a little bit lingering, you'll see it all wrapped up in The Targeted. But the individual stories in The Vanished and The Accused were completely like bow on totally done. And so what you'll see is when you get to The Targeted, the heroines from The Vanished and The Accused, their experience is different from Chloe's. And so she's reflecting on how Margot and Janae had different ways of dealing with the trauma, and that's one of the ways she's like, I got frozen. You have flight, freeze, and flight, fight, and freeze. And they basically,
yes,
each of them kind of did a different take on that.
different
And
take. That's good.
so she's going from the freeze to fight, and the others never really got to fight. And so she's like in this lone island. And so now she's beginning to realize that I don't have to do that. And so she's realizing that she can actually live in community, whereas she's always kind of been over here on her own, but nobody else would realize that. They would all think that she's kind of the glue holding them all together, but to herself she's this island. And so
Yeah,
it was really kind of fun to explore that, because in the other books she looks like the outgoing one who's kind of holding it all together, but now when you see it from her perspective, you realize she feels like she was the one who was abandoned, she was the one that everybody left behind, she was the one who had to pick up all the pieces, and she was the one who never got to leave. And
while
so
hurting, while
yeah,
hurting.
exactly. And so she was the one who now bears the responsibility for everybody, even though it's not hers to carry. And so it's this really interesting um, opportunity to kind of explore some of those that you don't have to have gone through that trauma to have those reactions. So
Yeah,
again, I think we can all relate to that without
yeah,
that intense trauma and be like, yeah, I felt that. I know
yeah.
what that feels like to have the
Mhm.
mask on and nobody sees behind the mask to me and how I'm feeling and how I'm feel abandoned or whatever. And
Yeah.
then how God steps into that.
Now that's so good. But I have to ask this.
Mhm.
Please tell me, is there a few good men moment in this story? Like, I want the truth.
The Few Good Men moment is actually more in the accused because that one goes all the way to trial. Whereas this one,
Oh, all right, guys, we got a few good moment in the accused. I mean, there's something delicious in every book.
yeah, yeah. So that one is actually like my most John Grisham trial room the whole way through.
Okay.
This one you get the resolution, but it's different. It still has that you get the resolve.
You get the
Uh,
feeling of justice that
yeah,
we want. Yeah.
yeah. And
So
so it just ties it up a little differently.
that's all right. I like it. But man, that scene, you can't handle the truth. One of my
Yeah,
favorite
I
things in
love
cinema.
that scene.
I know. I love that scene so much. So I'm going to skip ahead to a question. We'll come back to another one because we're talking about it kind of right now. And that's the concept of being targeted, which is terrifying. And
Yes.
you may not even know what's happening to you, which is even more terrifying. So
Mhm.
in this particular case with Chloe, we've already addressed that she was isolated, whether she isolated herself or that's how she felt she had to live. But yeah, you feel so exposed, especially if you were targeted and you think, will it happen to me again? So I am both isolated and exposed. So how did you use the character's isolation from others, yet her exposure to this villain to create tension in the story?
So I think I did a it kind of built that internal drive to I have to act now
Okay.
because she had to have that reason to I can't keep waiting because this happened
Yeah.
so
The fight.
far ago in the past. Why now? Why did she have to move now? And so it really kind of drove the whole story was this idea that time's up. I have to move now. I can't stay on the fence anymore. And so I think that really was what kind of the driver for the whole book became.
And is that kind of your inciting incident? Like oh no, he's back in town. Okay, I'm off the fence. I got to go for
Yeah.
this.
It was a
Oh,
combination of her sister showing up, and
yeah.
then she's trying to decide what she's going to do, and then there's like the book or the him coming back.
Him
So there's
coming
like these
back into
three
town
things that all happen about the same time,
same
and she's
time.
like, I can't wait anymore. I've got to move.
Yeah, and you got to give her a valid reason to go to this
Yeah,
legal clinic for help so she can meet there.
exactly. Exactly.
So, this book asks hard questions about telling the truth and the cost of telling the truth. Was there a point in the writing process where you debated which path to take regarding the epiphanies of the characters? Are you going to go kind of the gentle way or were you going to go the hard way? Like, how did you decide how you were going to make that confrontation that we were just talking about happen?
Yeah. Yeah, because that's always when you've got these kinds of situations, it would be easy to take the easy path and just
Oh,
go,
yeah.
don't do that to the character. They've already experienced enough. And yet at the same time, you have to kind of push the character's face into the dirt and push it down a little bit and be really mean to them. Um, because that's where the most change happens. And sometimes you have to remind yourself they're fictional, so you're not actually hurting a real person. Um,
But
and
it feels like it sometimes.
it does because they become real to us. And so
Mhm.
with Chloe, it really became important to raise the stakes. And so, like, from the beginning, she knew that by doing this, especially because of like the time, I mean, she was a paralegal, so she fully understood how difficult it was going to be to win a case. So she knew if she sued the coach, there was a good chance she wasn't going to win. But she also felt like she had to protect the girls. And so
That's
it was
good.
that kind of thing that she was like, I am willing to suffer and to
Yeah.
lose in order to protect them because they are worth it.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of that self-sacrificing. Nobody else should have to experience what we have. And I can't prove where he's been. I can't prove what he's done to other people, but I know what he did to me.
Right. Yeah. You tell your story. That's where the truth is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. That is a hard path, but I so admire people who take it.
Yeah. And
It's
there's a cost. And so you don't want to minimize that cost because every one of those women who stood up in court and told their story, every one of those women who stood in front of Congress and told their story, that will never go away. that is forever available on the internet. And so there is an honoring in that telling that I want to make sure people understand, because there is, in today's world, it will never go away. You can never say, hey, take that down. I've changed my mind. I don't want everybody to know that's a part of my story.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And I think it always throughout history, it usually is one person who changes the course of history. Think about William Wilberforce in England, who changed the course of the slave
Yeah,
trade from out of England, and just one person who had the courage to stand up against the grain, against his peers. And we could think about others in our own history who stood up
yeah,
to Frederick Douglass and others, and Rosa Parks and others who stood up against this nonsense and ended up changing it for the generations to come. And
yeah,
that's to me a legacy. And I don't
absolutely.
even care if they don't know my name, but if I can change something for those coming behind me, that's
Yeah,
a legacy. So let's talk about,
absolutely.
so that leads us straight into the faith element of this book. Um, we also see in the targeted that faith shows up more as endurance than a resolution. So, which I love, because faith is often an endurance over kind of this resolution, and boom, everything's good, everything's perfect. And I think it's enduring faith. Jesus says all throughout the book of Revelation, to him who overcomes, which to me speaks of endurance.
Yeah,
So sometimes faith doesn't neatly fix things, but it sustains people along the way. So talk about how you wove faith themes into the story, but you didn't make lemonade out of pain and hurt,
yeah. Well, and I think that's so important. Like in my books, I never want it to feel like a sermon, and I never want it to misrepresent life. Life is
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
We all have moments where we're like, man, we're on the mountaintop. And then we have days where we're in the valley.
Yeah.
And it's important to recognize that God's in both. But I'll never forget. I don't even remember why God gave me this image at one point, but it was that in our darkest days, Jesus is sitting next to us, crying with us. And so that's really kind of what I wanted to portray, that even when we can't feel him, even when we can't see him, he is right there, right next to us. And he's feeling what we feel, even if we can't sense him. And so no matter how dark, no matter how deep the pit, he's there and he wants to help us out of it. And so some people may read this book and not sense a whole lot of faith, and that's okay. Other people may read the book and be like, oh my gosh, it hit me right where I am. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the beautiful thing about when we're creating with God, is it tends to work that way. And so this is one of my books that has a lighter layer of faith, but it really speaks to that piece that
Yeah.
Chloe comes to recognize that he was there in the middle of it. And that's what Janae, Margot, and Chloe have really wrestled with across this whole series, is just that idea that he steps into the pain. He doesn't remove us from it. He doesn't like sweep our journey into this beautiful, magical Disney world of faith, but he's there in the midst of everything.
Yeah. I love that. I think for you, we were at a conference once, and Ted Decker was our keynote speaker. You may not remember this.
Mhm. Yeah,
And he told the story of a woman who was really struggling with issue. I won't go into all the details, but she had been raped by 3 boys as a child. And she was a Jesus lover. She was in ministry. She was following the Lord, but she struggled with one particular thing. And she finally encountered the Lord, and he was there in the situation, tears running down his face. He was looking at her, then he was looking at the boys, and she said, no, Lord, they have to pay. And he said, I already did. And that
yeah,
has just been so powerful. And that's the beauty of forgiveness. And I think that's what you're talking about here, is what this coach did, or what someone's done to anyone who's listening, doesn't make it right. And it
yeah,
doesn't mean you approve if you forgive. And
exactly.
forgiveness is really the linchpin to all of us being free, because we
Mhm.
have been forgiven, and I think that's the faith message of the story. We see faith walked out in forgiveness, which is so powerful.
Well, and it's
So
that idea of, are we going to be trapped?
Yes.
Or are, because, and that's the thing. I mean, forgiveness is really about me. It's not about the other person.
No,
And
yeah.
that's
That's
hard.
so much. Yeah.
It's so hard. But when we can really grasp that, because often I'll find myself going, okay, yes, I give it to the other person, but I don't want to be trapped in an offense. I don't want to be trapped in this moment.
1000%.
I want to be able to walk in freedom. So, Lord, do what you need to in my heart and help me keep praying as many times as I need to so I'm not stuck here.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's attributed to Saint Francis of Assisi for saying something along the lines of unforgiveness is like drinking poison water, but expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
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 And so that's to me, that image is the faith of the story. Just we see characters walking out true faith. And that I think God gets on every single time. So the targeted, that's what we're talking about today, everybody. The third in the secrets to keep. I was struggling so much during my rehearsal. I'm like, secrets to keep. I can't say that. So the targeted third in the secrets to keep series after the accused, and I got them written down, and I just went,
And the vanished.
and the vanished. I knew that. I saw the A in my head, and the vanished.
Yeah.
So you guys got to check this out. So, what do you want readers to feel, whether they've read you before or not, when they read those final pages? What's that takeaway? Because I know we craft stories with something in mind that we want them to be entertained. We want them to feel hope. But in this particular series, what do you think their takeaway could be?
Really, that, I mean, it comes back to that hope that no
Yeah.
matter how dark life is, God is with us and he's there if we look for him. And I think if people walk away with that, that would be beautiful.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. That's awesome. So for book clubs, we got a book club rapid fire question, which, by the way, is a great book club book. Give me a single question you'd love for them to debate if they're reading this book in their club.
So, based on reading this book, has it changed how they would approach people who've experienced trauma?
Ah, that's a good one. That's a really, really good one. Yeah, we all need to grow in compassion. All right.
Yeah,
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, they say that fiction is a great way to build empathy. And so that's really one of my hopes when I write books that deal with difficult issues like this one.
Yeah, so true, so true. All right, we're ready for the lightning round. Flashes of lightning.
Yeah.
Yay. Okay, 3 words, Cara Putnam, for the vibe of this book.
Hope, intense, and a little bit of romance.
Ah, I like that. Hope, intense, romance. You notice how she put intense right before the romance, guys.
It's not a kissing book, but there's just a little
All right,
bit.
that's good. We can deal. All right, one trope. This is an interesting question. One trope you embrace, but one you subverted, and how? I want to know how you subverted a trope.
And you know what? I'm so bad at tropes. I'm really bad at them. I would say one that I embraced would be probably the um, enemies to lovers, sort of, because Dare and Chloe don't quite know what to do with each other. So it's
Okay.
almost enemies to lovers when they start out, not quite all out enemies, but definitely not.
Difficult to lovers.
Yeah, there you go. Difficult to lovers, not quite sure what to do with each other. And one you subverted would be the whole victim, because she's a victim, but she doesn't act like a victim because she's a victim
So
who's taken
good.
back her story.
So good. I think that's take back your story are key things. So like, don't
Yeah,
let those people, whoever they are, take up real estate in your life and in your
yeah,
head. So that's so good. Yeah, I struggle with tropes sometimes too. I'm Googling what are all the tropes?
yeah. And then what trope fits my book? Because I
what
don't
what
know.
thriller tropes with a dash of romance? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Readers who love X book, whatever book you want to say, will love this because,
So if you love Colleen Coble, you'll love my
of
books.
course,
But mine tend to be a little heavier on the mystery slash suspense than the romance. Hers are more balanced. I also think if you are more on the ABA general market side and you like John Grisham or Lisa Scudolini, but on the like there's no swearing, no none of that kind of stuff, then you would still like my books a lot.
Thank you, Cara, for being on your own podcast. Sounds like you got another winner on your hands.
Thank you so much for stepping in and serving as the co-host. This was a lot of fun, Rachel. I appreciate you.
Hey, ask me anytime. It was fun. I always love hearing about what you're writing. So until then, everyone, go out and read The Vanished and the Accused so you are ready for this May release of The Targeted, and go and pre-order it so you have something delicious to read on your vacation. So we'll see you next time on Book Talk, everyone. Bye.